So this session, we are actually talking about leveraging digital concepts to advance accessibility. We've had a lot of conversation about digital health just in the last session. We'll probably touch on that a little more in our panel discussion. I wanted to go ahead and start the session with Niki Bonet. She's going to talk a little bit about navigating through the future of digital health. So we'll turn it over to her, and then we'll hear from Christine Von Raesfeld, and then we'll come back together for a fire chat. So Niki, it is all yours.
All righty. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Niki Bonet. I'm going to be talking a little bit today in terms of what is coming in advancements for patient accessibility, at least from the perspective of technology. Don't worry, I did realize that I was coming in late in this session, so we will keep things high level so they're very easily able to be understood, as well as kind of keeping you folks engaged. I didn't want to go ahead and lull everyone into a nice afternoon nap, if you will. So we're going to focus on three key areas, and those are where we are today and also my predictions for what is on the horizon, and the four pillars of technology that is really driving us to push the art of what is possible. Now, before we take a look into the future state of possibilities, I think it's really important for us to take a step back to gain perspective on the bigger picture. Historically speaking, the term digital health really experienced its genesis a little over a decade ago. And it's really hard to believe that the pioneers of innovation had this realization that mobile devices and tablets were going to radically change how we thought about healthcare. And there are certainly many challenges that impede the natural evolution of tech innovation. And by and large, the biggest obstacle faced is resource management, with 95% of IT decision makers struggling to find enough time to balance between their day-to-day task along with finding time to work on innovation projects. And certainly no surprise here, a close second with 60% was identifying and remediating security risk. The level of sophistication and scale of these cyber attacks that we have been experiencing has grown exponentially over the last 5 years. Now, something that did give me great hope is the fact that accelerating remote patient monitoring and telehealth was actually on this list. And as you can see there at the bottom, that's with 43% of IT decision makers. So we are striving in the right direction. So at the foundational level of patient access, we are looking at solutions such as telehealth, remote patient monitoring, along with what I am coining the remote health 2.0. And really when I think about these categorically, I would classify the last two with having more of a focus on easier access in order to have earlier interventions to enable us to have better patient outcomes. Now, digital health had a standout year in 2021 with startups raising an eye-popping $29.1 billion. And to help put that into perspective for everyone, that was $15 billion more than the previous year. So I can say one thing for COVID in terms of a silver lining. Really what happened with having COVID come into all of our lives was it accelerated the acceptance of using telehealth. And a poll revealed that 73% of users anticipated to continue using telehealth services or to actually increase its usage in the near future. And two areas that received a massive boost in funding that is worth noting was diabetes and also musculoskeletal care, which both of those are becoming much easier to manage in virtual settings. Now, when I was doing my research, one company that really stood out to me was Hinge Health. And they offer a platform for completely having virtual physical therapy. And if you stop to think about that for a moment, you'll realize just how innovative that really is. I mean, essentially, this eliminates travel time to go to your appointments. Patients don't have to worry about the astronomical cost of gas. Along with the fact that you're not having to take time off of work or wasting any of your precious time sitting around in a crowded waiting room. In my opinion, this is truly a win-win for us and the epitome of what patient access in the future can look like. So what is actually propelling us forward into this future state of accessibility? So essentially, there are four driving forces that are really underpinning these improvements. And those are improvements in our chips and processors, the amount of power that is coming out of these tiny devices is astounding. Second to that, we are experiencing this time where we are having greater connectivity in our infrastructure, and that is being driven more by 5G. And then thirdly, we have the proliferation and wide adoption of usage of the Internet of Things. So thinking about your wearables and your, Apple Watch and those types of things are kind of being more and more accepted and adapted and also integrated into other applications. And then lastly, we are talking about edge computing. That's a big one. And essentially what that means is that the data that is being captured on the device is also being processed there, which allows us to have near real-time data insights, which is incredibly powerful when we are talking about healthcare. So I know that you're probably thinking, what do we have to look forward to in the future? And a promising new technology that we do have is something that has evolved from machine learning AI. And that is the concept of using a digital twin in both healthcare settings and clinical trials. And I'm sure most of you are kind of wondering, what is a digital twin? And that's essentially a digital version of you. And I rest assured, this is not a technology that is exclusively used in healthcare. Matter of fact, it's being used in other industries, particularly in manufacturing, and has received wide adoption. So your digital twin is the concept of all of your health data. So compromise of all of your health data. Think of your data points like baseline, vital readings, your demographics, allergies, and the likes. And this technology really shows great promise, particularly for the life sciences. It can be used as another proof point to meet the endpoints in clinical trials, which will enable to accelerate the bringing of new treatments to market at a faster rate. But to kind of level set expectations, this is something that is very forward thinking, and I do believe that we are probably realistically a good 5 to 10 years out before we see this as the norm and being accepted. So all of these facets of technology bring us tremendous potential in how we bring about new models of healthcare treatments. And just like a famous superhero once stated, with great power also comes great responsibility. So with these new advancements, we're going to have to consider things that are not always top priority in tech innovation, such as ethics, and also looking at things such as data privacy. So in conclusion, for us to solidify this new future, this is really going to take an all hands on deck strategy and for all of us to be involved. And with that, I thank you all for sitting through.
All right, I hope that you all can hear me. I'm at a conference. I've tried to find a little area somewhere on the side, but I want to say thank you to Niki for really bringing up some of those points. And I don't have slides. I prefer not to. I'd like to talk and interact. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. I'm not sure I'll see them, but I'm sure Sarita will. My name is Christine Von Raesfeld. I founded a small nonprofit called People with Empathy. And I have multiple autoimmune and rare disease conditions. I'm still on a diagnosis journey of really trying to figure out where I am, but I'm getting closer. Anyways, I started my journey really long ago. My illness and surgery was at 5, and my health history has been kind of a nightmare. I've never been interested in science or anything like science. School was not my forte until the most recent years, when I finally realized how science, sorry for the background noise, how science could actually improve my own life and improve the quality of my life. A few years ago, I was walking with a walker. Periods of time I was in a wheelchair, and really just confused about where I was. I felt like a burden on society, and just really felt like, I didn't have any value. And all that changed when I started to really just dig deeper into my own life and what I had to offer. So I started with a program which you all know is 23andMe now, and it was 23andMe back then, but it was really geared towards the lupus study. And it really sparked my interest in that clinical side of the disease, why this was happening. No one else in my family really had any symptoms, so I wanted to know. From there, I went from 23andMe. I found a program at my local hospital. Luckily enough, I grew up in Silicon Valley, so I'm near Stanford Hospital. And I was able to get into a program called the Human-Wide Program. And what that basically did was showing patients, or really trying to build a program to see how much patients could monitor themselves at home and interact with their own care. And so a lot came out of that. I had a pharmacogenomics test, which really changed the way my treatment is issued now. And in California, there's actually a Senate bill to make that available to all Medi-Cal patients. So really moving forward on that. But from there, I joined Patients Like Me. And like Niki said, the idea for me of this digital twin was introduced. And to me, and I don't know if you all think about it this way, but I thought of this as, I've gone through a lot of damage from medications. I have 3 joint replacements. I have toxic encephalopathy. I've lost some night vision. My idea of a digital twin was this person that lives on the internet or on the web or wherever you want to say they live, who was then able to take these medications for the physical Christine and physical me didn't have to deal with all of those side effects and dealing with, the emotional roller coaster that goes along with trying those. So I've really been an advocate since, Patients Like Me, which Digital Me program has since halted, but so many other initiatives out there. Now I'm part of the All of Us research program. I've been on their virtual advisory team for a few years, and my nonprofit just joined their community advocate group. And so we're really going to try and push out the importance of information, and as we move to this strangely weird technology driven and data driven world, I think what we have to realize as patients is how much power we actually have in our data, and not just ourselves. We could help ourselves, obviously, by being able to collect our own data and work with our doctors, but how that information can really help our communities. And so I like to talk to people about healthcare kind of like a pencil. And a pencil is something that no matter where you are in the world, you recognize what a pencil is. You know how to use it for the most part. I don't hold it, right? But you just, everybody knows what it is, but it was not one person that went into making that pencil, right? You had the lead guy and the wood guy, that together, that everybody in the world could recognize. And that's what I think we need to evolve to in healthcare. You know, I see in the spaces that I go to a lot of different meetings in different spaces. I'm actually at the Precision Medicine World Conference now, and I see hope for all of us, just amazing technologies. But one of the things that I also see is that we as patient communities are broken. You know, we look at ourselves as burdens. We look to other people to help us when we have all of the answers within ourselves. And so I really think it's going to become important as we move forward into the future, especially as I know a lot of people are just getting educated around clinical trials in general, but we're on the verge of decentralized clinical trials and really bringing clinical trials to you, right? Engaging hopefully your own physicians and rebuilding the community that we've kind of lost along the way. You know, our relationships with our physicians have been broken, and there is a lot of mistrust, not just with physicians, but industry and our providers of healthcare insurance and even our legislators. And I think it's time now for us as patients to really organize ourselves. We've had a great discussion all day on the similarities and how we can all help each other, but I think there's so many deeper ways that we can do that. And I think really teaching each other, showing each other, you know, and working with organizations that we know and that we trust, looking to researchers who are really interested in our disease spaces, and really having more of that collaborative look and that holistic look at not only ourselves, but our future. And I think one of the things that when we get a disease, we often tend to look inward, right? It's always about what are you going through and how do you get through this? And I'll give you a little bit of backstory. People think that I have this amazing, so everything I do pretty much is, you know, under my nonprofit now, or really just, but I struggle, right? As a person trying to survive in one of the most expensive areas in the world, and really just see opportunities for us as patients to expand just being a patient and really becoming experts and becoming community members and leaders who give our perspectives and our opinions, because lived experience is a lot. And sometimes it's a lot more than a couple of years of industry experience, but we have to know how to talk to each other. We have to know how to interact with different groups who may not see our immediate stance, and how do we work together to bridge those gaps and to bring everyone together. But I think, again, it's a collaborative mission that's going to take technology and health providers and hospital systems and everyone. But I have hope that we'll get there. You know, I'm in a different space than many patients, and I see the promise on the horizon. And I just really think we need to learn how to organize and help each other out, and really know that what we're dealing with is horrible. Everybody is going through it. And now even normal people are going through it, right? We're getting so much more help now that healthy people are sick. And COVID has been a little bit of a curse, but a blessing. We're seeing things advance very quickly, and we're seeing that, you know, even things like telehealth and telemedicine is great for some people, but we're also realizing we still need a human touch. And so as patients, we have to make sure that that human touch is still there. We have to connect with each other. We have to really, you know, share our journeys and our missions, and look at that and know that what we're going through, it's not a shame. It's not a burden. None of us asked for this. We were given something that could really help elevate others, and we have voices that we can use. And so I think legislation is always important, you know, showing your face and really knowing what's out there, looking at the technology. I said I was involved with Stanford Human Wide, and patients like me, and people asked me how I got started. It was really just knocking on doors, right? Finding out who was giving out scholarships, learning. That was a big part of it, was sitting back and actually learning different parts of things before I inputted my perspective, and learning how that perspective could be, you know, used in a way that could really get our points across as patients in a different way. And so I want to yield the rest of my time, Sarita, to just a conversation, because, you know, I think the conversation part is always more fascinating. And Nikki, come back, because I wanna pick your brain. I have a whole different outlook, right? With whole genome sequencing coming and all of that on how our future ends up. But again, it's that combined effort. So, hey guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine and Nikki. So a lot of things that you guys both talked about really jumped out to me. One of the things that you just said, Christine, was just talking about the different patient communities and how we're all so broken. And it made me think about something that your organization speaks to, and that's silos, and how, we find ourselves in these silo communities, whether it's the patient community, if it's the research community, if it's the digital health space. Like, how do we break the silos? How do we create those collaborative opportunities for patients, and honestly, everybody in this space, all the stakeholders? How do we start that?
For me, I think it's the conversation. I think it's bringing educated people to the table, right? And really building on each other. I'm always happy, to elevate someone else's voice and bring them in. I think we need to have more conversations instead of one person speaking and giving a perspective. And we need to look at the issues from every angle of these things, right? We have so many organizations who are all doing the same exact things, right? And we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. And what we need to do is play on those strengths and weaknesses, right? I am not great at the business side of things, but I am great at networking and connecting and finding out what companies and what people should be working together. And I think we need to take more of that type of viewpoint. I look at it as kind of like in relation to my life and my nationality and everything, right? I'm a mix. And my mom is Filipino, my dad is German Irish. I don't have one disease, there's multiple. I don't fit into a box. And I know so many other people don't, so I think it's those conversations that break out of those boxes that need to be had with all of us there. I go to a lot of conferences, and HCP conferences don't have pharma, and pharma don't have physicians, and patients don't have regulators. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a mess. Nikki, you're on mute.
Thank you. I completely agree, with Christine's sentiment, right? And one thing that she stated that really stuck out to me, one from a patient perspective, but also just from, a technology perspective, and how do we design these digital health, accessibility applications. And that is to keep the human element front and center, because she is right. Just the connectivity is incredibly powerful. And I think that, as she stated, really where we kind of start, or at least a good springboard, is kind of finding small little pockets of communities, such as Patients Like Me, or maybe you find a Facebook group, which is fantastic as well. However, not everyone is going to gravitate towards that type of community. So I think, as Christine had stated as well, is something that needs to have a lot of consideration is everyone working collectively to kind of figure this out together, not in these silos. And I don't have a straightforward answer. If I did, I'd be a billionaire, but I think that we're on the right track.
I want to make sorry, Sarita. I want to make a really funny comment. So I grew up in Silicon Valley, right? And we went from very small community to very big tech. And we have a lot of very smart individuals. Some of the greatest, most intelligent people in the world live here. But they also have a very low EQ, right? And I think we have to bring that emotional intelligence to the people that have that technology-driven mind, and make sure, that we're considering those things, because they are great at finding problems and solutions. But the other part of it, isn't always people's wheelhouse, right? So we've got to, again, bring that connected. But Sarita, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go right ahead.
No, I was actually, she was joking about being a billionaire. It made me think about, the stats that she gave during her talk about startups contributing $29.1 billion, and that was $15 billion more than the previous year. And I think you said it, Christine, when you said, COVID has been both a curse and a blessing. What are your thoughts? I think we've learned that virtual isn't bad. It's an opportunity. The digital climate is something that's been a benefit to a lot of patient communities. And COVID kind of brought that to the surface. Like, what are your thoughts about that? I think personally, it has expanded a lot of platforms that may not have otherwise expanded had they not had those virtual opportunities. And so I just love your thoughts about it and how we've grown in the digital space because of that.
So my thoughts, I know Sarita, you and I have talked about this as well. I think, we look at ourselves often as patients, like I said, like a burden, like we don't have a purpose, right? And I think that one of the things we have to think about as patients is reverse that thinking, right? And realize that this entire industry is based off of our data, right? So if there are new technologies, if there are things that need to be built, we need as a community to combine ourselves together, because I'm telling you, a couple thousand patients are a lot more powerful than anything that industry has to offer. And if we can organize ourselves in the way that we trust ourselves and we can share our data among ourselves and use that as leverage when we're looking at treating our own diseases and looking at our quality of life. There are a million companies that jumped into healthcare when COVID hit and profits became a thing again, right? We were moving towards a really empathetic world for a little while there. And then we kind of took a shift. And so I think as patients, we also have to realize where our data is going, who we're giving it to, right? What is happening to that data after the fact? Is it being sold to third-party companies? Is it being used for things that you may not be aware of? Those are things that we also have to really take a stronger hold on and really talk about, right? We sign consent forms out of desperation when we really should be looking at things as a whole community before we allow each other to even do these things, And so I think California has a thing, right? I mean, I go to other states and I travel and it says, do you, if you're a California resident, you can opt out and I can say, do not sell my data. I can't do that if I'm in another state. And I think those are things that we have to look at as patients, is more of the business side of this. We are contributing all of the information that goes into this business, but are we getting anything back out of it? So.
And that's a really good point. Niki, I want you to chime in on that too, but I was just going to say really quickly, I think that's why so many organizations are so protective of their patient data. I think, I think we're doing so much hoarding of the information because we feel like we're protecting the data rather than having those conversations to figure out how can we collaboratively still protect the data, but still work together to reach a broader group of people. And so, I think when we use that as our reason behind we don't share, that's an opportunity to change our perspectives and grow. Because other organizations, it just leads to further silos, right? Like everybody's trying to have patient data, and a lot of it is all the same. And then you have the patients getting frustrated because that's just another organization that's asking for more data. So Niki, go ahead if you wanted to chime in on that.
Sure. So, I think I fully agree with what Christine was stating. And, again, the power falls back on us personally, because you have to think about something. We have this perspective that, oh my goodness, we are, relying on these companies to heal us and to help us. But flip the script, those companies are relying on us for their profits. And, you know, we talk about these things, and I'm very open to, you know, I like the aspect of us thinking collectively that we need to share the data. But in technology, there's a little saying, he who owns the data, you know, is the winner. That's the person, that's the richest in the room. That's what's going to happen. And, you know, I don't see organizations from a business standpoint handing that over easily. I just don't. Now, I do think that there have been some aspects that are coming to light that are starting to change this perspective. I'm almost positive that what I think they're calling it ARPA was approved by the president, and he signed that into a bill for more exchanging of research information, and kind of having it to where we can have a centralized location to kind of access this data, which is definitely something that needs to be done specifically for treatments development into like rare diseases and those types of things. Because bringing a treatment to the market, you need very large amounts of data sets. And when you're dealing with a rare disease, you're not going to have large amounts of data sets. It's just not possible. So I do think we have a lot to work on, but I also feel like things are shifting, the tides are changing, and I think they're changing in the right direction.
And I want to mention too, I work with an organization, I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're actually called the lightcollective.org. Lightcollective.org is their site. And they are really an organization focused on patients' rights and digital rights, right? They're looking at the metaverse, they're looking at Facebook, they're looking at everything, and really the security points around protecting us as patients. So if you're a patient and organization, there is a pledge that they have, and everybody can take the pledge. They actually recently spoke on stage at the Stat News conference and really talking about data privacy and digital rights and how we take agency over our data as patients, because that is a conversation that's going to need to happen at some point, right? Especially as we build out into this metaverse and making sure, again, that my digital Christine isn't being taken advantage of. There is a lot of discussions, you know, around those issues on human rights, even for our digital people and what countries they reside in. So it's going to be a long and an interesting, I don't want to say battle, because I don't want to put a negative connotation to it, but I think we all know how sometimes industry works. But I do want to say, I think a lot of times we criticize the people that work in industry. And I do have to say, we cannot criticize individuals for a system that we allow, you know, to happen, right? And we really need to start getting, you know, taking accountability and really going out there and again, back to that voting issue, right? As we move into these issues around ownership of data, the voting is going to become very important for those of us who are underserved and minority populations, right? I've talked to economists at Stanford and globally who see this as the new data economy, right? And that this is potentially a chance to make things right again if we can educate people and do it in the right manner. So totally hopeful. But Sarita, what are your thoughts?
You know, so I'm thinking about I've heard of a lot of platforms. Several of them are fairly new that speak to patients owning their data. They actually store the patient data, but the patients can opt in to how the data is shared. And so I have a few thoughts about it. I think there's value in the collective effort, and I think there's value in the voice. I am one of those people who, not for reasons behind the person who holds the data is the star in the room, but just that concern of protecting patient privacy. I think when it comes to collecting data, especially, on the organization side of it, we want to know, that we are the ones keeping that information safe. And so, I'm still on the, I guess, on the learning curve of it all, because I understand why it's so important to protect it. But I also find value in having access to the data for the purpose of creating greater and more solutions and treatment options and research efforts and all that kind of stuff. So,
And I
you know,
think,
I'm,
Sarita, in answer to that, I think if we were able to enable, if patient organizations were able to pair together and really unite, right, and have
Mhm.
that trust between each other, at some point, I actually see negotiations between patient groups and industry, right, and them
Yes.
being able to make those, we don't have one yet, but there should be a materials transfer agreement that goes from patient groups to industry and research with an e-consent, which some of you may not be familiar with, but it's really just the ability in an electronic fashion, right, to be able to take away some of these consents if you find that someone is not doing right by a community, right? And so I think there are ways that we can potentially, and I think there's tons of companies out there, some with good intentions, some not so good intentions. And I think it's up to us as patients to really vet those people that are out there and share our information about who we like, who we, and those types of things to really build not only their communities, but ours, and build those bonds to really keep those relationships going. But I have the same concerns, right? I mean, and I feel for children of rare disease, right? I got sick as a kid. Luckily, I got to work, but there are so many kids out there who will never have a possibility or a chance to work. And this could be their saving grace, right? This could be their income, their basic income provided by the data they are collecting. So I think it's that weird balance, right? We're right in that beginning and that early adopters. And I've heard people say we're in the wild, wild west, right? It could go one way or the other. And I'm hoping for the good guys.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree. I think as we continue to just grow as a rare disease community, I have to say, we have been in the rare space just a little over 5 years. And just the momentum that we have seen just in that short amount of time has been amazing. So, I'm really hopeful that as we continue, we find value in understanding more and figuring out how we can work more closely together. But I'm just a huge, huge advocate behind collaboration and networking, kind of like what you were saying, Christine, about being a networker. I recognize when it comes to conversations, a lot of times just because you can speak to something doesn't mean you should. I think there's always opportunity for us to bring other voices into the conversation. And I think we ought to take advantage of those opportunities if it's going to help the patient population. So, of course, we can continue talking throughout the rest of the conference about this topic because it covers so many different areas, but we are going to pause right here and start prepping for session 4. We're going to take another quick break. We'll probably do about a 10-minute break, but we'll do another quick break and then we'll come back and kick off with session 4. Thank you so much to Christine and Nikki. Do you guys have any final words before we close out this session?
Nikki, I just want to say it was fun. And if for anyone that's listening, feel free to reach out. I'm on, unfortunately, I said it in the comments, I'm on every social media, including TikTok. At 47, I did not think I would ever say that, but I'm there. And just really, I'm going to head back into the other conference. I won't hit the last session, but I'm going to catch the recording. And again, Sarita, I adore you and thank you for putting this together.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Nikki?
All right, thank you. Yeah, Christine, this was great. I like our synergy. I hope that you and I have an opportunity to do something together in the future. And again, Sarita, I absolutely love your organization. I love what you folks have done in such a short amount of time. It is absolutely amazing and provides so many with hope. And that's what we need. So with that, thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate you.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much. All right, guys. So we're going to take another quick break. Let's do about 10 minutes and then we'll come back for session 4.